Callahan the Camper Van by Alan Kemp, illustrated by Shane Sumner. Callahan was lonely. He had been in this very same barn for longer than he could remember. His tyres were flat, his wheels didn't turn anymore, and his bumper had long ago fallen to the dusty floor. He had more rust than paint and couldn't remember the last time his engine had run. The only company Callahan had was Sunny and her 3 kittens. They would spend long hours playing hide-and-seek and catch in his raggedy interior. Then, exhausted at the end of a long day of play, would curl up on the driver's seat to sleep. Every night Callahan dreamt of the days long ago when he had belonged to a family with 2 children. Most weekends they would go on a journey to some place new, and in the summer they would go on a big boat to somewhere hot, where he couldn't understand what the people were saying. Callahan was very, very sad. One morning Callahan was dragged from his dream by a loud protesting of the barn door hinges as they were forced open. Then, as he tried to focus on the source of the disturbance, he was blinded by a bright morning sun. The last time he had seen the sun was on that fateful day when he had been placed in this barn. Just as he could make out that it was the farmer from the large house on the hill that had disturbed him, he was blinded again by a series of flashes and clicks, as the farmer completed what seemed to Callahan like a strange ritual. Then the doors were forced shut again and locked. Callahan was left to contemplate what had just happened. He spent many a sleepless night worrying what it was that the farmer had done, and what it could possibly mean for Callahan. None of the images he imagined were pleasant. Callahan was very worried. After a few weeks, Callahan had started to forget about the farmer's strange behaviour. That was until one morning when the kittens' play was disturbed by the sound of voices outside the barn. Yet again the doors were forced open with a sickening squeal. Callahan was again blinded by the bright morning sun. This time the farmer was accompanied by 3 strong men, who secured strong straps around Callahan and connected the end of the straps to a large machine. Before he knew what was happening, Callahan was being dragged out of the barn, leaving 2 deep furrows as his seized wheels cut into the barn floor. That was bad enough, but worse was soon to follow. Before Callahan had recovered from being dragged out of the barn, he was lifted off the ground. Not a pleasant feeling for a camper van. He was lowered onto a trailer and taken on a very long drive. At the end of the journey, Callahan was again lifted in the air and placed in what Callahan could only describe as a new barn. Callahan was very scared. When the men returned the following day, Callahan could see that he was indeed in a new type of barn with lots of tools and equipment. The next thing he remembers is being in agony as the men removed his engine. It felt as though his heart had been ripped out. Then he felt as though he was being ripped in two as his wheels were removed. Callahan was starting to miss the kittens and his old barn. Next it felt as though he was being tickled all over as a vibrating sander removed all of the rust. This continued for what felt like years to Callahan. It went from pain to burning to tickling, then back to pain. Callahan felt really, really sorry for himself. After a restless night, Callahan awoke early. What would today bring? More pain, fire, and tickling? The men arrived, so Callahan closed his eyes and braced himself. First his wheels were refitted, then his bumper, then the seating, and finally his engine. He was greased, oiled, and polished. Callahan couldn't believe it. After all the pain he had endured over the past few weeks, he now felt as good as new. Callahan was just getting used to being whole again when a different man got into the driver's seat and started the engine. Before he was aware of what was happening, Callahan was cruising along the country roads under his own power. He couldn't believe it. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Callahan was moving again. He drove past trees and fields, houses and shops, until he finally stopped outside a house where a young boy and a young girl were jumping up and down and cheering at Callahan. Callahan was stunned. Before he could catch his breath, he was loaded with luggage. The children climbed in, and they were on the move again. They went down winding roads through beautiful countryside, then onto a very large road where Callahan went faster than he had ever been before. The children were excited, laughing and chattering the whole time. Soon they were back on the small roads again. Twisting and turning in an ever downward spiral, they turned a very sharp corner, and Callahan just stopped and took a deep breath. He couldn't believe his eyes. There, on a beautiful sandy beach, with the sea gently lapping at the shore, were hundreds of camper vans. Some were old, some had been restored like Callahan. There were hundreds of people laughing and dancing to the live music and the smells. Callahan could smell food from all over the world mingled with the salty air. Callahan was very, very happy. The end.